The stars looked different from this side of the galaxy. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the horizon's edge, watching the alien sun grow larger on the view screen. His hands gripped the railing a little too tight. 3 months ago, humanity had been alone in the universe. Now they were about to meet their 7th alien species. "Approaching Gentari, Space Captain," said Lieutenant Amy Parker from her station. She was the ship's linguistic specialist, a young woman who could somehow make sense of clicking sounds and radio waves that passed for language among the stars. Her screen showed dozens of translation algorithms running at once. Jake nodded. "Take us in slowly. Let's not spook anyone." The Gentari were important, really important. They were one of the oldest species in the Galactic Coalition, the big alliance of alien races that humanity had just joined. The Coalition had 847 member species. The Gentari had been members for over 2,000 years. Their queen, Velshara, was said to be over 300 years old. She ruled absolutely, and her word could make or break humanity's future among the stars. "Nervous?" asked Sergeant Danny Cruz, walking onto the bridge with his usual relaxed swagger. Danny was the ship's combat instructor, a stocky man with dark hair and an easy smile. He never seemed worried about anything. "Terrified," Jake admitted. "We're about to meet a 300-year-old insect queen who could kick us out of the Coalition with one word." Danny laughed. "Relax, Cap, we're humans. We charmed the Velcons, didn't we? And they were literal rock people with no sense of humor." Dr. Lisa Bennett looked up from her medical station. She was reading reports about Gentari biology, her blonde hair pulled back in a tight bun. "The Velcons didn't have a concept of insults, Danny. The Gentari do. They take protocol very seriously. Our liaison warned us 3 times about proper behavior." "I read the files," Danny said, waving his hand. "Don't touch their antennae. Bow when greeting. Use formal titles." "I got it," Jake hoped that was true. The Coalition liaison, a bird-like alien named Chirek, had been very clear. The Gentari valued dignity and formality above all else. Any insult, even an accidental one, could damage relations permanently. The ship shuddered slightly as they entered orbit around the Gentari homeworld. The planet below was beautiful, covered in crystalline structures that caught the sunlight and threw it back in rainbow colors. Cities sprawled across the surface, each one a geometric work of art. "Receiving landing coordinates," Amy said. "They're directing us to the royal platform. The Queen will meet us personally." Jake felt his stomach tighten. A personal meeting with the Queen was an honor, but it also meant more pressure. Everything had to be perfect. 2 hours later, Jake stood in the shuttle with his team, checking his dress uniform one last time. Amy looked calm, reviewing her translation notes. Lisa was running a medical scanner over everyone, making sure no one was carrying any biological contaminants. Danny was cracking his knuckles, looking like he was about to walk into a gym rather than meet alien royalty. "Remember," Jake said quietly, "formal behavior. No jokes, no casual speech. We represent all of humanity here." Everyone nodded. The shuttle doors opened. The landing platform was massive, made of the same crystal material that covered most of the planet. It sparkled in the afternoon sun. At the far end stood Queen Velshara. She was huge. The reports had said Gentari were large, but seeing her in person was different. She stood nearly 8 feet tall on 6 legs, her body covered in dark purple chitin that gleamed like polished metal. Her head was angular, with massive compound eyes that seemed to see everything at once. 2 long antennae curved back from her forehead, and her forearms were crossed in a formal pose. Around her stood dozens of other Gentari, smaller but no less impressive. Guards with weapons, advisors in ceremonial robes, and what looked like scribes with recording devices. Jake led his team forward, walking slowly and keeping his head slightly bowed as the protocol demanded. When they reached the proper distance, he stopped and bowed deeply. "Great Queen Velshara," Amy said, her translator device turning her words into clicking sounds. "Humanity thanks you for this honor. We come in peace and friendship, hoping to learn from your ancient wisdom." The Queen's antennae twitched. When she spoke, her voice was surprisingly melodic, translated instantly by their devices. "Welcome, humans. We have watched your species with interest. You are young and chaotic, but you show promise. Rise." Jake straightened, relief flooding through him. The first hurdle was cleared. The formal greeting continued for several minutes. Gifts were exchanged. The Queen presented them with a crystal sculpture. Jake offered her a diamond from Earth along with samples of human art and music. Everything was going perfectly. Then movement caught Jake's eye. Something small was approaching from behind the Queen's guards. It was another Gentari, but tiny, barely 3 feet tall. Its chitin was still soft and pale, and it moved with the clumsy energy of a child. "My youngest grandchild," the Queen said, and there was warmth in her translated voice. "Prince Kixatal. He has been excited to meet humans. He watches your broadcast constantly." The little prince rushed forward, his antennae waving wildly. He stopped in front of the humans, his large eyes examining them with pure curiosity. "You're really humans?" he asked, his voice high and chirping. "You're so small. And you only have 4 limbs. That's so strange." Jake smiled despite the formal setting. The kid reminded him of human children, full of questions and energy. "Yes, we're humans. It's nice to meet you, Prince Kixatal." The young prince bounced excitedly. "Can you teach me human words? I want to learn your language. Not through translators, but real human speech." Amy stepped forward, looking delighted. "Of course. What would you like to learn?" But before she could begin, Danny moved beside her. He knelt down to the prince's level, that easy smile on his face. Jake felt a flicker of worry but pushed it aside. Danny was good with kids. He had nieces and nephews back on Earth. "Hey, little buddy," Danny said.
"Want to learn a real human greeting?"
Something humans say to friends they really like? The prince's antennae quivered with excitement. Yes. Teach me." Jake should have stopped it. He should have noticed the mischievous glint in Danny's eye. But everything had been going so well, and the mood had become more relaxed. He was just glad the formal part was over. Danny leaned close to the prince and whispered something. The prince repeated it back, his translator temporarily off, the sounds awkward in his alien throat. Danny nodded encouragingly and gave him a thumbs up. "Perfect. Now you can greet any human with that, and they'll know you're their friend." The prince beamed with pride. The Queen looked on with what might have been approval, seeing her grandchild bonding with the strange aliens. Jake made a mental note to ask Danny what he'd taught the kid. Later. Right now. The ceremony continued and everything seemed to be going wonderfully. He had no idea that in 3 days, those whispered words would nearly start an interstellar incident. The state dinner was the most magnificent thing Jake had ever seen. The great hall of the Gentari Palace stretched nearly a 1/4 mile, with walls made of crystal that shifted colors with the light. Hundreds of aliens from dozens of species filled the space, all dressed in their finest ceremonial garments. Jake sat at a long table with his crew, trying not to stare at everything. To his left was a Velcon, the rock person species they'd met before who communicated by vibrating the table. To his right was something that looked like a floating jellyfish, speaking in pulses of colored light that his translator struggled to interpret. 3 days had passed since their arrival. The humans had attended meetings, toured Gentari facilities, and exchanged cultural information. Everything had gone smoothly. Jake was starting to relax. Maybe they would pull this off after all. Amy was deep in conversation with a coalition scholar, discussing translation theory. Lisa was examining the strange foods with scientific interest, scanning each dish before carefully trying small samples. Danny was entertaining a group of minor diplomats with stories about Earth, making them laugh with tales of human sports and competition. Queen Velshera sat at the head of the massive hall on a raised platform, surrounded by her advisors and family members. She had been gracious over the past few days, even warm by Gentari standards. Jake dared to hope that humanity had made a good impression. The dinner was in its 3rd hour. Different species had given speeches welcoming humanity to the coalition. Gifts had been presented. Food had been served, though the humans stuck mostly to the plant-based dishes that their scanners confirmed were safe. Jake was listening to a Velconian ambassador describe mining techniques when he heard it, a high chirping voice cutting through the dinner conversation. "Humans! Humans! Where are the humans?" Prince Kixatal came rushing through the hall, weaving between tables with the uncoordinated energy of a child. His pale chitin had darkened slightly over the past 3 days, and he moved with more confidence. 2 guards followed behind him, trying to keep up. The little prince spotted their table and made a direct line toward them. Several guests smiled at his enthusiasm. The Queen's antennae twitched in what might have been amusement at her grandchild's energy. Jake stood politely as the prince approached. "Good evening, Prince Kixatal. Are you enjoying the dinner? The prince bounced excitedly. Yes, but I've been practicing. I want to show you. Practicing what? Amy asked, smiling at the young alien. The greeting. The human greeting that Sergeant Cruz taught me. I practiced with my language tutor and she said my pronunciation is getting much better. I want to show you. Jake felt something cold drop into his stomach. He looked at Danny, who had gone very still. There was a flicker of panic in Danny's eyes that Jake had never seen before. Maybe later, Jake said quickly. We're in the middle of the formal dinner and… But the prince wasn't listening. He was too excited. He stood up straight, his antennae pointing forward proudly. He took a breath and spoke in carefully practiced English. His translator turned off so everyone could hear the actual human words. Hello, Motherf ker. You are my favorite Motherf ker. The prince beamed with pride. Did I say it right? Can you understand me? The great hall went silent. Not the polite silence of respectful attention, but the shocked silence of complete disbelief. Hundreds of aliens stopped mid-conversation. Hundreds of translator devices worked frantically to interpret the human words and provide context. Jake felt his blood turn to ice. He stared at Danny, who had gone pale. Amy's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. Lisa whispered, "Oh no, oh no, 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 no." The translators finished their work. All around the hall, aliens began understanding exactly what the young prince had said. The context, the meaning, the crude vulgarity of it. Some species gasped. Others made sounds of shock in their own languages. On the raised platform, Queen Velshara slowly rose to her feet. Her antennae had flattened completely against her head. Every human had learned that this was a sign of extreme anger in Gentari. Her compound eyes fixed on Jake and his crew with an intensity that felt like physical weight. The prince, confused by the sudden silence, looked around nervously. Did I say it wrong? Sergeant Cruz said humans use this greeting with friends they really like. The Queen's voice boomed across the hall, translated instantly into every language present. Why is my grandchild calling you motherfucker, human? Explain this insult immediately. Jake opened his mouth, but no explanation came. What could he possibly say? A Krell warrior diplomat slammed his clawed hand on the table and stood up. The Krell were one of the Coalition's military powerhouses, honor-bound and aggressive. This is an outrage. The humans teach filth to royal children. They mock the Queen through her own grandchild. Other voices joined in. A Pelthian ambassador called for humanity's immediate expulsion from the Coalition. A Tertian delegate demanded formal sanctions. The hall erupted into chaos, dozens of species all shouting at once. Jake stood frozen. This couldn't be happening. 3 days of perfect diplomacy destroyed in 5 seconds. Danny stepped forward, his face full of guilt. Your Majesty, I can explain. Silence. The Queen's voice cut through everything. I will not hear excuses from the one who committed this offense. Captain Morrison, control your crew. Jake grabbed Danny's arm and pulled him back. His mind raced, trying to find some way to fix this, but there was nothing. The damage was done. The young prince had started crying, his soft sobs adding to the chaos. He didn't understand why everyone was angry, why his proud moment had turned into disaster. Queen Velshara spoke again, her voice cold and formal. The human delegation will confine themselves to their ship. You have 48 hours to leave Gentari space. We will file a formal complaint with the Coalition Council. Your species has proven itself unworthy of membership. Your Majesty, please, Jake tried. But 2 Gentari guards were already moving toward them. The Queen turned away, dismissing them completely. She gathered her weeping grandchild in her arms and carried him out of the hall. Her advisors followed, their antennae all flat with anger. The humans were escorted out in disgrace. All around them, aliens whispered and stared. Jake heard the words savages and barbarians and crude species in a dozen languages. Back on the horizon's edge, Jake stood in his quarters and stared at the wall. 48 hours. That's all they had. Humanity's dream of joining the galactic community, destroyed by a stupid joke. There was a knock on his door. Danny stood outside, his face full of misery. Captain, I'm so sorry. It was just supposed to be funny. I didn't think… No, Jake said quietly. You didn't think. And now we're all going to pay for it. He looked at his crew. Amy was researching frantically, looking for any precedent, any way to fix this. Lisa sat with her head in her hands. Danny looked like he wanted to disappear. We have 48 hours, Jake said. Let's figure out if there's any way to undo this disaster. Because if we can't, Humanity's future in the stars just ended before it really began. Outside the ship, the beautiful crystal city of the Gentari gleamed in the alien sunset. Somewhere in that city, a queen was deciding humanity's fate, and Jake had no idea how to change her mind. Amy Parker didn't sleep that night. While the rest of the crew tried to rest or stared at walls in despair, she sat in the ship's library surrounded by screens and data files. Somewhere in the millions of pages about Gentari culture, there had to be something useful. Some precedent, some rule, some way to fix what Danny had broken, but there was nothing. The Gentari took insults seriously. Their history showed species expelled from their territory for much smaller offenses. One delegation had been banned for 50 years because they accidentally wore the wrong color to a funeral ceremony. What Danny had done was so much worse. Amy rubbed her eyes and looked at the clock. 24 hours had passed. They had 1 day left. The Queen had refused all communication. Human messages were deleted without being read. Requests for meetings were denied. The Gentari had shut them out completely. There was one possibility left. It was a long shot, but Amy had to try. She found the name in the diplomatic registry, Tixaran, chief advisor to Queen Velshara. He was old, even by Gentari standards, and known as a scholar. He had studied over 40 different species during his long life. Maybe, just maybe, he would be curious enough about humans to grant a meeting. Amy composed a message. She didn't apologize or make excuses. Instead, she wrote, "Honored Tixaran, I am a human linguistic specialist. I believe there has been a fundamental misunderstanding about human communication. If you are interested in understanding how such a catastrophic mistake occurred, I would be grateful for a chance to explain. This is not a request for mercy, but an offer of knowledge. Amy Parker, Lieutenant Horizon's Edge." She sent it and waited. 1 hour passed, then 2. She was about to give up when her communicator chimed. A message appeared. "I will meet with you, alone, 1 hour. Coordinates attached." "Tixaran?" Amy's hand shook as she got ready. This was it. Their last chance. Jake insisted on coming with her, but Amy refused. He said alone, "If I bring you, he might cancel." "Let me try." She paused. "What do I have to lose? We're already expelled." The coordinates led to a building away from the palace, a quiet structure that turned out to be a library. Tixaran waited inside, his old chitin duller than the younger Gentari she had met. His antennae moved slowly, thoughtfully. "You are brave," he said through the translator. "Or foolish. Most humans would hide in shame." "I'm desperate," Amy said honestly, "and confused. I need to understand why this happened." Tixaran gestured to a sitting area. Gentari didn't use chairs, but there were cushioned platforms at various heights. Amy sat on one and the old advisor settled across from her. "Your species taught profanity to the prince," Tixaran said, "a child of the royal family. There is nothing to understand." "But that's just it," Amy said, leaning forward. "We didn't think we were teaching profanity. Not in the way you understand it." Tixaran's antennae curved forward, a sign of interest. "Explain." Amy took a breath. How could she make an alien understand something that barely made sense to humans themselves? "Humans have a complicated relationship with words," she began. "Some words are considered bad or rude in formal settings. But among friends, especially close friends, those same words can mean affection or bonding." "That makes no sense," Tixaran said. "A word either means insult or it does not." "For most species, yes," Amy agreed. "But humans are different. We use context and tone and relationship to change meaning. The word that Danny taught the prince in a formal setting, it's very offensive. But between friends, especially in human military culture, it can actually be a term of endearment." She pulled up files on her datapad. "Look at these examples. Human soldiers calling each other names that sound terrible, but they're actually showing affection. Human friends using crude language that means they trust each other enough to be informal. Human family members teasing each other with words that would be fighting words between strangers." Tixaran studied the files, his antennae moving in patterns Amy couldn't read. "Your species insults each other as bonding?" "Sometimes, yes. We call it banter or ribbing. It's a sign that you're comfortable enough with someone to be completely yourself." "This is chaos," Tixaran said. "Yes," Amy admitted. "We are chaotic. We're young and messy, and we don't always think things through." Danny saw a curious child and wanted to make a connection. He thought teaching him a secret human word would be funny and would make the prince feel special. He didn't think about how it would sound in a formal setting. He didn't think about translation and context. He just acted on instinct. Foolish instinct. Yes, but not malicious. That's what I need you to understand. Danny didn't wake up and think I'm going to insult the Queen. He thought he was being friendly to a kid who reminded him of his nieces back home. Tixaron was quiet for a long moment. His antennae moved in slow, thoughtful patterns. Tell me more about human chaos. You survived as a species despite this confusion with language? Amy found herself explaining human history. Wars started by misunderstandings. Peace made through jokes that broke tension. The way humans used humor to cope with tragedy. How human comedians made entire careers out of saying shocking things that made people laugh instead of fight. She showed him examples of human sarcasm, where people said the opposite of what they meant. Irony, where words had double meanings. Self-deprecating humor, where humans insulted themselves to make others comfortable. Tixaron absorbed it all, asking questions, making connections. Hours passed. Amy's throat was dry from talking, but she kept going. This ancient alien scholar was actually listening. Finally, Tixaron sat back on his platform. Your species should not have survived. This level of miscommunication should have destroyed you in your early development. Probably, Amy said with a tired smile, but it didn't. Maybe because we got really good at figuring out what people actually mean instead of what they say. We learned to read context and emotion and intent. And your Sergeant Cruz misjudged the context with Prince Kixatel. Badly. Terribly. In a way that makes me want to throw him out an airlock. But not because he wanted to hurt anyone. Because he's an idiot who didn't think about consequences. Tixaron made a sound that the translator marked as thoughtful consideration. He stood up slowly. I will present this information to Queen Velshara. I make no promises. She is very angry, but perhaps understanding will help. That's all I ask, Amy said, standing as well. We accept that we messed up. We just want her to know it wasn't meant as an insult to her or the prince. Tixaron walked her to the door. As she was leaving, he spoke again. Lieutenant Parker. One question. Yes? If this word can mean both insult and affection, how do humans know which meaning is intended? Amy thought about it. Context, tone of voice, facial expression, the relationship between the people, whether they're smiling or angry. 1,000 little signals that tell us what's really being said. Exhausting, Tixaron observed. Yes, Amy agreed. Being human usually is. She walked back to the ship through the crystal streets, not knowing if anything she'd said would matter. But at least someone had listened. At least one Gentari understood that humans weren't monsters, just confused children themselves, stumbling through a galaxy they were only beginning to understand. Back on the horizon's edge, she found Jake waiting. Well, I don't know, Amy said honestly, but I think I made him understand why we're so damn complicated. Jake looked at the countdown timer on the wall. 18 hours left. I hope it's enough, he said quietly. So did Amy. So did they all. The message came with 6 hours remaining on their deadline. It was short and formal. The Queen will grant you one final audience. You will have 10 minutes to speak. After that, the expulsion order stands. Prepare your delegation. Jake read it 3 times, hardly believing it. They had a chance. A tiny, final chance. He gathered his crew in the briefing room. Amy looked exhausted from her all-night session with Tixaron. Lisa had bags under her eyes from stress. Danny looked like he hadn't slept at all. Guilt written across every feature of his face. This is it, Jake said. 10 minutes. We need to decide what to say. I should apologize, Danny said immediately. This is my fault. I'll take full responsibility. We all know that, Jake said, not unkindly. But an apology isn't enough. The Queen has heard plenty of those. We need to make her understand. Amy leaned forward. Tixaron seemed interested in human chaos, in how we function despite our messy communication. Maybe that's the angle. Tell an alien queen that we're chaotic and messy? Lisa asked. That sounds like a terrible idea. No, Jake said slowly, understanding dawning. It's the only idea. We can't pretend to be something we're not. The Gentari have protocol and dignity and 3,000 years of tradition. We have 70 years of spaceflight, and a history of making mistakes. Trying to be like them won't work. He looked at Danny. You're coming with us. We're not hiding what happened. We're explaining it. 2 hours later, they stood once again in the crystal throne room. It looked different now, colder, less welcoming. Queen Velshara sat on her throne, her antennae still flat against her head. Advisors surrounded her, including Tixaron, whose antennae were in a more neutral position. There were no other guests this time. No ceremony. Just the humans and the Gentari leadership with guards posted at every exit. The Queen spoke without preamble. "You have 10 minutes, speak." Jake stepped forward. He had prepared a speech, practiced it a dozen times. But standing here, looking at the angry Queen and remembering the crying prince, the prepared words felt wrong. He threw them away and spoke from his heart. "Your Majesty, I'm not going to make excuses. What Sergeant Cruz did was wrong. Teaching that word to your grandchild was inappropriate, short-sighted, and has caused harm to both your family and to human-Gentari relations. For that we are truly sorry." He paused. The Queen's expression didn't change. "But I want you to understand why it happened, even if that doesn't change your decision. Sergeant Cruz didn't do this out of malice or disrespect. He did it because he's human, and humans are messy and complicated and don't always think before we act." Danny stepped forward, his voice rough. "I saw your grandchild and he reminded me of my nieces back on Earth. Little kids full of questions and energy. When he asked to learn human words, I wanted to make him laugh. In my world, among soldiers and friends, that word is something we say to people we trust. I thought, stupidly, that teaching him a secret word would make him feel special." "You made him a mockery," the Queen said coldly. "I know," Danny said, and his voice cracked slightly. "I know, and I hate myself for it. I was trying to build a bridge and I burned it instead. But I swear to you, I never meant to hurt him or insult you. I'm just an idiot who didn't think about consequences," Jake continued before the Queen could respond. "We're a young species, Your Majesty. We've been in space for less than a century. We've only known alien life existed for months. We're like children ourselves, stumbling around trying to figure out how to act in a universe we don't fully understand yet." He took a breath. "The Gentari have been in the coalition for 2,000 years. You have protocol and tradition and dignity. You know exactly how to behave in every situation. We don't. We make mistakes. Terrible, embarrassing mistakes like this one." "And you think this excuses the insult?" the Queen asked. "No," Jake said firmly. "Nothing excuses it, but maybe it explains it. Humans survived on our planet not because we were perfect, but because we adapted. We made mistakes and learned from them. We failed and got back up. We're still doing that. We're still learning," Amy stepped forward. "Your Majesty, humans use language differently than most species. We layer meaning on top of meaning. The same word can be an insult or a term of affection depending on who says it and how. We use sarcasm and irony in jokes that don't translate well. We confuse even ourselves sometimes." "That sounds like a weakness," one of the advisors said. "It is," Amy agreed. "But it's also a strength. Because we're so used to miscommunication, we got really good at figuring out what people actually mean. We look at intent and context and emotion, not just words. We learn to forgive mistakes because we make so many ourselves." Jake saw something shift in the Queen's antennae. Not much, but a slight movement. He pressed forward. "We can't offer you the refined dignity of the Gentari. We can't promise we won't make more mistakes because we probably will. What we can offer is honesty about who we are. We're chaotic and messy and sometimes inappropriate, but we're also adaptable and resilient, and we genuinely want to learn." He gestured to Danny. "This man made a terrible mistake, but he did it trying to connect with a child, trying to build friendship in the only way he knew how. That's very human. We reach out even when we don't know the right way to do it. We take risks even when we might fail." The throne room was silent. Jake could hear his own heartbeat. He'd said everything he could think to say. Either it would be enough or it wouldn't. Queen Velshara stared at them for a long moment. Then she looked at Tixaron, who moved his antennae in a complex pattern that must have meant something in Gentari body language. Finally, the Queen looked back at the humans. "You speak of chaos and mistakes as if they are virtues." "Not virtues," Jake said carefully. "Just reality. We're not proud of being chaotic, but we're learning to work with it instead of against it." The Queen stood and Jake's heart sank. This was it. She was going to pronounce their expulsion. But then something unexpected happened. A small voice called out from behind the throne. "Grandmother." Prince Kixatal emerged from a doorway, moving quickly despite a guard trying to stop him. He rushed to the Queen's side, his antennae waving urgently. "Grandmother, please don't send the humans away." Sergeant Cruz said he's sorry. He explained that he taught me a bad word by mistake. He didn't mean to make me say something wrong. The Queen looked down at her grandchild. You spoke with them? I asked the guard to let me see Sergeant Cruz. He apologized to me in Gentari. His pronunciation was terrible, but he tried really hard. He said I should never say that word again, especially to you, and that he was sorry for confusing me. The prince looked at Danny with his large compound eyes. I forgive him. He made a mistake. Can't we forgive mistakes, grandmother? The Queen's antennae slowly began to rise from their flat, angry position. She looked at her grandchild, then at the humans, then back at her grandchild. When she spoke again, her voice was different. Still formal, but not as cold. Out of the mouths of children comes wisdom, she said quietly. Then, to the humans. Wait here. She left the throne room with her advisors, taking Prince Kixatal with her. The humans stood in silence, not daring to speak or move. 30 minutes passed. Then an hour. Jake's legs ached from standing, but he didn't sit. None of them did. Finally, the Queen returned. Her antennae were raised now in a neutral position. She settled back onto her throne and looked at the humans with what might have been curiosity. Stay, she said simply. We will talk more. Jake didn't understand what was happening. The Queen had said stay, but that was all. For the next hour, she talked with her advisors in rapid Gentari that the translators couldn't keep up with. The humans stood there, afraid to move, afraid to hope. Finally, Queen Velshara turned back to them. Her antennae were fully raised now, alert and thoughtful rather than angry. Sit, she said, gesturing to cushions that guards brought forward. We need to talk properly. They sat. Jake's legs were grateful for the rest, though his mind was racing. This felt different from before, less like a judgment and more like a conversation. The Queen settled into a more relaxed position on her throne. Prince Kixatal sat beside her, quiet but watching everything with curious eyes. I have ruled the Gentari for 317 years, the Queen began. In that time I have maintained order, tradition, and dignity. My people respect protocol above all else. We have built a society of precision and grace. She paused, her antennae moving in a pattern that might have been thoughtfulness. And in those 317 years my people have changed very little. We perfect what we know, but we rarely explore what we don't. Tixaran moved his antennae in agreement. The Queen continued. You humans are the strangest species I have encountered in all my years. You insult each other as affection. You laugh at disaster. You take risks without fully understanding the consequences. You are chaotic and unpredictable. Jake wasn't sure if this was leading somewhere good or bad. When my grandchild spoke that terrible word at the dinner, my first thought was rage. How dare these crude aliens teach filth to a prince? How dare they mock our dignity? The Queen's antennae moved in a complex pattern. But then Tixaran presented his research on human culture. And my grandchild told me about his conversation with Sergeant Cruz, how the humans struggled with our language to apologize sincerely. And I began to understand something. She looked directly at Jake. You are not crude because you are inferior. You are crude because you are young. Your chaos is not a flaw. It is the energy of a species still growing, still learning, still willing to make mistakes. Amy leaned forward slightly. Your Majesty? I have been thinking about my people, the Queen said. We have perfected our traditions, yes. But we have also become stagnant. We do the same things in the same ways because they are proper. We rarely innovate. We rarely take risks. We have traded growth for stability. She looked at her grandchild. And perhaps that is why my youngest grandchild spends hours watching human broadcasts instead of studying traditional Gentari arts. He is drawn to your chaos because it is exciting. It is alive in ways that our rigid traditions are not. Prince Kixatal's antennae wiggled with excitement, but he stayed quiet. Sergeant Cruz made a terrible mistake, the Queen said, looking at Danny. But he made it trying to connect with a child, trying to bring joy. In Gentari culture, we would never risk such informality. We would maintain proper distance and protocol. And perhaps because of that, we miss opportunities for genuine connection. Danny swallowed hard. Your Majesty, I still shouldn't have— No, you should not have, the Queen agreed firmly. What you did was inappropriate and caused real harm. But your intent was not malicious. You were trying, however badly, to build a bridge. She stood, and everyone else immediately stood as well. I have made a decision. The humans will not be expelled. Instead, I am establishing a formal cultural exchange program between the Gentari and Earth. Jake felt his heart leap. Your Majesty, thank you. The Queen held up one of her 4 hands. There are conditions. Sergeant Cruz will remain here as a cultural liaison. He will be supervised closely as he teaches young Gentari about human culture, the appropriate parts of human culture. Danny's eyes widened. Me? Stay here? You created this mess, the Queen said. You will help clean it up. You will teach our children how humans think and communicate, so that future misunderstandings can be avoided. Consider it penance, Danny nodded quickly. Yes, Your Majesty. I'll do my best. I promise to be more careful this time. See that you are. The Queen's antennae moved in what might have been amusement. Though I expect you will still make mistakes. You are human after all. She turned to Jake. Captain Morrison, your ship may remain in orbit. You will coordinate with my advisors on the exchange program. We will send scholars to Earth and you will send teachers here. We will learn from each other. It would be an honor, Jake said, hardly believing this was real. The Queen looked at Amy. Lieutenant Parker, I would like you to work with Tixaran on creating better translation protocols. Your understanding of human communication nuances would be valuable. Amy smiled, genuinely delighted. I would love that, Your Majesty. And Dr. Bennett, the Queen said, addressing Lisa, my medical staff would benefit from understanding human biology better. Will you share your knowledge? Lisa bowed. Absolutely, Your Majesty. Queen Velshara settled back onto her throne. I am 317 years old. I have seen empires rise and fall. I have witnessed countless species join the coalition, but I have never seen a species quite like humanity. Her antennae moved in a pattern that the translator marked as contemplative amusement. You stumble into rooms you don't understand. You make mistakes that should doom you. You break rules without meaning to, and somehow you turn those disasters into opportunities. It is infuriating and fascinating in equal measure. Tixaran spoke up. Your Majesty speaks wisdom. In my research, I found that humans have a saying, we didn't land on the moon because it was easy, but because it was hard. They seek challenge rather than avoid it. Exactly, the Queen said. And perhaps that is what the coalition needs. We have become comfortable, safe. We avoid conflict and risk. The humans remind us that growth requires risk. That mistakes are part of learning. That chaos in controlled amounts can lead to innovation. She looked at Prince Kixatal. My grandchild will be the first Gentari in the exchange program. He will learn human language and culture properly this time. Perhaps he will teach his people that dignity and playfulness can coexist. The prince bounced with excitement. Really, I can learn more about humans? Yes, the Queen said warmly. Though you will learn appropriate words this time. 6 months passed. Jake stood on the same landing platform where this had all begun, watching another shuttle arrive. The cultural exchange program was thriving beyond anyone's expectations. He heard a familiar chirping voice and turned. Prince Kixatal was running toward him, followed by a group of young Gentari students. Behind them walked Danny, looking more comfortable in his role as teacher than Jake had ever seen him. The prince reached Jake and stopped, his antennae waving happily. Then in perfect English he said, Hello, Captain Morrison. It's wonderful to see you again, sir. Jake grinned and gently touched the prince's antennae in the Gentari gesture of affection that Danny had taught him, properly this time. It's good to see you too, Prince Kixatal. How are your studies? Excellent. Sergeant Cruz is teaching us about human idioms today. Did you know humans say it's raining cats and dogs when there is no precipitation of animals at all? Human language is wonderfully confusing. The young Gentari students chirped with laughter. Jake noticed they were more animated than adult Gentari, more willing to express emotion openly. The human influence was already showing. Danny walked up, shaking his head with a smile. Your Majesty wants to see you. Something about expanding the program to other coalition species. Jake followed him toward the palace. As they walked through the crystal streets, he saw small changes everywhere. Young Gentari wearing hybrid clothing that mixed traditional styles with human elements, street vendors selling human food alongside traditional fare, a public square where Gentari children played a version of soccer, adapted for 6 legs. In the throne room, Queen Velshara waited with Amy and Tixaran, both deep in discussion about linguistic theory. Lisa was showing holographic displays of comparative anatomy to a group of Gentari medical students. The Queen saw Jake and her antennae rose in greeting. Captain Morrison. Perfect timing. I have been speaking with other coalition leaders. Many of them are curious about the humans now. They want to know how a species so chaotic has integrated so successfully. What did you tell them? Jake asked. The truth, the Queen said, and Jake could swear he heard amusement in her translated voice. That humans succeed not despite their flaws, but because of them. That their willingness to make mistakes and learn from them is a strength we have forgotten in our pursuit of perfection. She stood and walked to a window overlooking her city. 300 years I have ruled with dignity and tradition. And in 6 months, one crude human sergeant has taught my people more about joy and flexibility than I did in centuries. I wouldn't say that. Your Majesty, Jake said diplomatically. I would, the Queen replied, and I am grateful for it. The humans have reminded us that growth requires discomfort, that mistakes are not failures but lessons, that sometimes the most important thing is not doing everything right but trying sincerely even when you might be wrong. She turned back to Jake. Tell me, Captain, does Earth have a saying about this? Your species seems to have sayings for everything. Jake thought for a moment, then smiled. We have lots of them. But my